what is one message, that you might have for researchers, innovators and, future leaders who want their work to create very lasting impact? What would that message be? Looking at the transformation of digital technology, artificial intelligence. When I go to bed and wake up, there's an AI innovation. Before lunch, there's another innovation. And
Yes.
even tomorrow morning, you hear about an innovation. So what's actually one message you're going to leave for early career researchers?
I think it's sometimes for anybody, is just kind of putting your head up and looking around at the world around you to understand the environment within which you're working. So you might have some great ideas, but if the world is focused on ABC and you're over here talking about Z, you're definitely pushing a boulder upstream.
Hi, well done, Cassie. It's a pleasure to have you on this Truth and Research conversation. Honestly, I must say that going through your profile, seeing all the things you've been doing right from your time at St. Michael's Hospital, you've really been a very great, contributor to the field of evidence-based projects and all. I want you to actually start by introducing yourself. Tell us about yourself.
Perfect. Well, thanks, David. It's really a pleasure to meet you and nice to be here today. So as you mentioned, I started my career at the bedside, if you will, working as a respiratory therapist and at an academic teaching facility hospital, as well as working in community, both at the hospital level and as well as within home care community services. So I had a really great opportunity to kind of see how healthcare delivery works across the spectrum and kind of obviously the impact it has on people's lives. But was always curious about how do decisions get made? How do you influence bigger change? And so started working up towards more administrative roles where I could be part of decision making and learning how the system how the pieces fit together on the other side. And that led me actually to a career in digital health and health informatics, where I brought my clinical perspectives and my change management expertise to some of the provincial and national digital health projects that were getting started at the time in Canada, and was really fortunate to work in an organization which we frame as a pan-Canadian health organization, meaning it's a step apart from government, but funded by federal government to achieve a specific mandate. And so I had the opportunity to work in one of those that was charged sort of with helping to scale electronic health records and digital health initiatives across the country. And so spent the bulk of my career there, working across sectors and jurisdictions, trying to help, bring the value from our health data and our information to researchers, to clinicians for care delivery, to patients themselves.
Well, completely. That's really very intriguing. Many people actually see your current leadership position now, but very few see the journey behind it. And looking back over the 25 plus years career from clinical care, you moved to national digital health, initiatives. So what experiences shaped how you think, about leadership and implementation today?
I think over and over again, what's proven true, a couple of things that I hold still in my mind in the way I do my work today is the understanding of community and remembering, we're working with people to achieve things. So it's really important to have a strong vision and a common vision to what you're driving towards. And so, that could be at the bedside for a patient individually, and what does their recovery look like if they're unwell, or their prevention look like if they're trying to stay well, right through to digital health initiatives, like where you're trying to change something. And you can only do that when you have the right people in the conversation and you understand what the benefits are that you're aiming for and to whom they will accrue. Because sometimes we're asking people to do things and they're not the recipient of those benefits, right? So getting a common vision and having everybody aspire to achieve that same thing can be a really good tool to kind of navigate some of those difficult tensions that pop up. So I guess to come back to your question with a little bit more of a highlighter, I would say a common vision and working with people, thinking about people and what's in it for them is enduring overall aspects of my career.
Of course, yes. Okay, I would really say that that's really very nice because many a times when you have the right people with you, also I believe it's something that actually helps you achieve your goal quicker, because there have been a lot of people that put out very nice ideas, but then along the line you get to realize that they don't really have the right army. I would say army, to execute that idea. And there was something intriguing that you talked about, the $1 million problem. You said that, from looking at some of your posts there, you said that strong strategies alone do not deliver results. Those are actually what you put out there. And then you said that execution does. So why do you actually think that so many well-designed strategies, research projects, and transformation initiatives fail, particularly during implementation? Why do you actually think about that?
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's a couple of things. Like I think when you're designing a strategy, I think we talked about, you need to be really clear about what objective it is that you're trying to aim for. So bringing the right people, those voices, and that into the conversation to understand perspectives of those interest holders that you're working with is critical. So you make sure that what you're talking about, what you're aiming for, actually makes sense and has the potential to achieve it. So the way you design a strategy, the way you go about understanding the things that you're aiming for is an important piece of it. But more specifically, then after that, I think you really need to be thinking about, how are we going to measure it? How are we holding ourselves accountable? What does success look like? And then backing that up to say, okay, if that must be true, then what are all the things we need to do to deliver it? And often I find there's somewhere in there where you get gaps and the dots don't get connected. So you can have an executive team, a board of governors or whatever, who have a strategy. It's a beautiful plan on a page, but then it's not translated into meaningful ways for the people that need to now deliver on it. So using KPIs or measurement outcomes of objective key results, whatever you're using to kind of help keep the focus on the things that you're doing is important, but then actually translating that in meaningful ways to those that have to deliver on it so that they understand what it is they're aiming for, what it specifically means for them in their role. Do they have to do something different? Why is that? What does that look like? And then using those measures to kind of keep it of focus. A lot of times when you see strategy sit as a plan on a page and we talk about it, it's up on the shelf. It's because it's off the side of people's desk. There's really no core intention at the individual level to do things differently. It was just some exercise we had to do to get it down on paper, and now that's the tick box. But you're actually talking about transformation with strategy, right? As an organization, you're trying to learn forward. You're trying to do things so you can continue to be sustainable, whatever that means in your context. And so you actually have to spend the time working with the people and making it make sense and then measuring against it. And so I feel like a lot of times there's just, when you get down right even to the basic level of an analyst, a coordinator, the front office support, everybody has to understand where the organization is going and what their piece is in it. And so we forget to do that sometimes.
Of course, yeah, yes. Oh, yes, that's true. And how about if we look at it from a research perspective now? Because right now we are looking at it from a research perspective, because many researchers, spend years, producing high quality evidence, but then the problem now is that yet much of that evidence never reaches policy or practice. So from your experience now, looking at what you just said now, what separates research that creates impact from research that remains on the shelf?
Yeah. You're making me think of a conversation I was invited to participate in maybe a year and a half ago with a number of universities and the research institutes within these universities. And we were discussing that perspective, and it was from a digital futures kind of way. And really, getting the right mix of people was one of the common takeaways that we had, is that you had researchers who might have a great idea. They might be connected with one or two people in an organization. Maybe they can get a bit of a pilot project or something going, but it hasn't scaled beyond that. Nobody has awareness of what the project is, what goals it was trying to achieve, and being able to see how it might fit into their environment is also something that's not clear. So it's almost like if you just throw it out there, you just assume it will be consumed, but you actually have to spell these things out and make it super clear. So some of the things we talked about there that I think are relevant to your question is trying to think about going where the people are that can actually consume it. And so are you just sticking to your academic conferences? But you need to go mainstream. Maybe you need to be going to hospital conferences and meeting with different people at different levels, right? To broaden the awareness and the understanding. So I think networking, building out community, finding ways to get the message to different audiences doing a bit of a bigger stakeholder idea and then thinking, how do I need to translate my message that they will understand it? How do I go and meet them where they're at so it can be consumable? And just building those relationships beyond who you might traditionally think about is one of the takeaways we had. And I think it's really important piece. Like we said at the start of this, like you're working with people. So who are all the folks and voices that need to have eyes on it? And I think if we can get it a little bit more mainstream and not just in these little siloed conversations or siloed conferences or 1 and 2 off relationships, it can really help to bring it mainstream.
Yeah, true. Of course, I really agree. In terms of building meaningful relationships, that's also really do help. But if we're going to look at this now, many early career researchers, because the aim of what we are trying to do is to make sure that there are early career researchers do get access to the right information, also get involved in some of this, because a lot of early career researchers, particularly in Africa and LMICs, most times they struggle with visibility and collaboration. And now translating those ideas into sustainable impact is something that becomes questionable. So what practical advice do you have to give to them?
Well, I know, that journey from research into practice is just unfortunately way too long, and hopefully with the the acceleration of AI and other ways that we can continue to like smooth that out, perhaps. But technology is not actually the problem here. It might be an enabler of helping to distribute and disseminate information more clearly that it can be consumed. But I think in terms of practical advice, like, getting a peer-reviewed published journal is amazing, and that's always the gold standard. Randomized control trials are amazing too. But when you actually partner with the stakeholders, the interest holders, not everybody needs that kind of level of stuff. So a white paper, gray literature, like other ways of just getting it out. It doesn't have to be the mega thing all the time. And so that was part of the conversation we had too, is like, if you have a smaller study that's maybe not an RCT and it's a different thing, but you have interesting results, start to share that early. Start to generate some buzz around it. Share your early insights. It's a lot of the times what's really helpful to bring people alongside is you're sparking interest. You're getting them to understand what you're aiming for. They might have great questions that for you that you can build back into the way you're working as a researcher to help inform. And you're kind of co-developing a little bit more with industry. And I'll use that term quite broadly, whatever sector you're trying to do your work in. I think is really helpful. You don't have to wait to the end. Like, start early, communicate early, bring people along the journey with you. I think the research will be stronger, but it also starts to get earlier results out instead of waiting 10 years for something to be available.
Yeah, true. Of course, it's always very important to start early. Personally, I will always look at myself as a public health professional back after my undergrad. Then I started, doing research, reviewing literature. I used to like to review literature. That was my hobby. Like, I just like reading literature. I would just go out there, check on Google Scholar, look at articles, try to see what other people have done. Then I maybe kind of look at articles. So I struggle with technically that how I learned how to write was by asking colleagues, from different institutions to send me a sample of what they've done so I could look at it, compare and contrast and, create some kind of meaningful, insights from it to now apply on my own level. So, but that, and also you talking about, the reason, it's also important to put yourself out there, because when you put yourself out there, it kind of predisposes you to the opportunity to see people who share like minds and all of that. So if I'm going to ask, looking at your journey, that's Cassie back in 1998, that started her career. I'm going to ask this question, like, what are some of the most important leadership qualities that you feel that are actually very much needed to drive meaningful change in complex systems, such as maybe healthcare, research institutions and government organizations? Because I'm just kind of looking at the wealth of experience that you've already exhibited.
Yeah. Well, I think for anybody is good listening, right? Like you need to open your ears and close your mouth a lot of times and listen to the people around you. Not everybody has the same level of articulation or communication abilities, but if someone's saying something, they're trying to tell you something. So try really, really hard to hear what it is that they're trying to say, because it is all the little voices that help to inform the level at which I think a leader needs to be managing, and paying attention. And so if a leader's role is to be thinking about the strategic vision, how do they manage risk, how do they empower those, that listening piece is important, and relationship building. I think it's also amazing when you have the willingness to be brave and to do something different, to take calculated risks where they make sense, and to not just follow a cookie cutter approach. Be innovative. The world is changing quickly. There's a lot of bright sparks at all levels of organization. So, trying to be approachable and build rapport across your teams is also a really important thing. And I say that because I think when anybody in a leadership position, a leadership team, an individual, when you actually have the insights and you can understand the culture of your organization, and how it's humming along and where the opportunities exist, you have way more chance of being successful, and of understanding early where risks might come that you now have time to mitigate against or plan for. And so alongside that, I think really effective governance is important too, and understanding from an organizational perspective, or how your organization fits into a broader ecosystem, how decisions get made, how people are held to account, what expectations are of you as a leader for your individuals in your team, your organization, is really important, to make sure that you are holding yourself to account to deliver on your strategy or your vision. So for me, that kind of being present as a leader, being visionary but getting out of the way, and then having strong governance over the initiatives and the organization as a whole are some critical things that I hold really close to my heart.
Yeah, if I could just reiterate on what you said. You said that understanding where the risk could come from and then know how to mitigate that. Could you just stress more on that, looking at the type of leaders we have today in several organizations? And I'm sure some researchers, people, professionals who are in several institutions, they do graduate into becoming leaders, leading
Yes,
others.
for sure.
So I would want you to
Yep.
throw more light on that particular statement.
Well, I think anytime you're delivering on a project, an initiative, a goal, there's always going to be pros and cons to things, right? And so when you're trying to deliver on things, you're trying to understand, is this going to move in the way I think it's going to move? And are there any unintended consequences that might be popping up? And when you have a good culture where it's safe and people are able to speak up or share their voices, or you've got that cognitive diversity, because it's not just one kind of person or brain that's doing the thinking, you can better anticipate early what some of the factors are that you might not have thought about. Maybe someone's introducing, like, did you know if you actually do X, Y, Z, this is going to happen? Well, no, and I hadn't thought about it, but now I appreciate the perspective that you're bringing, right? And so now if I understand that early, maybe I make a different design decision. Maybe, it could be anything. The design decision could be staffing, resources, timing, milestones, approach. It doesn't matter. But now you've got some headwind, some time to do something about it, rather than it becoming an issue and a fire that you have to put out. So that's kind of what I mean from that is, so that links back to people and how you show up as a leader and a safety culture, psychologically safe culture.
Yeah, true. Of course, yeah. Yeah, I do agree with that. So let me say, okay, what is one message, that you might have for researchers, innovators and, future leaders who want their work to create very lasting impact? What would that message be? Looking at the transformation of digital technology, artificial intelligence, a lot of when I go to bed and wake up, there's an AI innovation. Before lunch, there's another innovation, and
Yes.
even tomorrow morning you hear about an innovation. So what's actually one message you're going to leave for early career researchers?
I think it's sometimes for anybody, is just kind of putting your head up and looking around at the world around you to understand the environment within which you're working. So you might have some great ideas, but if the world is focused on ABC and you're over here talking about Z, you're definitely pushing a boulder upstream, right? And it doesn't mean that Z wasn't a good idea. It just means that the timing and the fit for it might be a challenge. There might be valid reasons why you continue to pursue it. But if everyone's talking and walking in a different way, that's a challenge for you to have to overcome. And so I think sometimes thinking about the work that you're doing and the environment you're in, what are the government initiatives? Where is funding flowing? What does that look like on the international stage? Where are there opportunities to partner with patient groups if you're in a disease-specific condition that you're doing research for example, or in industry for technology development? What does that research look like? You really need to be paying attention to your end users who might benefit, and checking in and understanding what that looks like and what the environment is. I think one of the pieces you've been kind of pointing to as we've been chatting is that translation, right, is such a challenge. And so as much as possible, trying to understand what are the levers that you can pull to bring the right conditions that your efforts can move from your research lab into mainstream awareness, and then maybe into therapeutics, technologies, whatever that looks like for uptake. And so it's not just one person or one effort that's going to need it. It's a community that's going to help to do that. And so who do you need to engage with? Where do you need to play? Is it with a different group of people than you're working with today? And so really thinking about meaningfully building out your network to understand how grants might be achieved. What does the translation support look like? Where's your network that can help you to do that? How do you have to design or do your research differently to bring people in so that you have better chance of adoption later? That kind of mindfulness about raising your head out of your day-to-day desk and thinking about the broader ecosystem, I think is important, and it would be a message I'd want people to really think about.
Honestly, Cassie, one thing I can take away from this conversation, is that you've just clearly showed that impact does not really happen simply because of we have a good idea or we have a good evidence. It kind of happens whenever vision, people, strategy, and execution comes together. And I must really say that I'm very honored and delighted for all the insights you've shared, within this very short period of time. And I'm going to say thank you for sharing your journey and practical insights on our global truth and research audience. So is there any other thing you want to add, or you feel like you want to chip in, before we wrap it up?
I just want to thank you for this opportunity and for the work that you're doing. It's really inspiring, and I can see that you're doing your best to help line up the moons and the stars to connect those pieces. And I think it's important that you're bringing all these different perspectives through this work to try to help turn on some light bulbs for people and just maybe start their day with a little nugget of thinking about it differently and having hope for continuing on. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much for your time, and I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. See you next time.
Thank you.